Good evening. Thank you for joining me. Tonight I would like to speak to you about a fascinating book I just read twice. It's Waking the Tiger by Peter Levine, Dr. Peter Levine. Uh, this is a fantastic book. I've said before that I think it probably should be the first book we read in breath work because it finally made me understand or feel my felt sense. So I have really had a breakthrough in this book. And in more ways than one. The general thesis of this book is that we are humans, but humans are animals. And if we want to learn how to deal effectively with our trauma, then we must embrace our, what another author has called our creatureliness. And humans like to think of themselves as being above animals. Or not even animals. And this is a dysfunctional way of seeing ourselves, particularly from the perspective of trying to heal our trauma. The author gives a fascinating intro in which he describes a chase between a cheetah chasing an impala. And the cheetah is faster than the impala. And so the impala tries to get away, but it's hopeless. So right before the cheetah's claws are or his teeth are gonna sink in, the impala goes and plays possum, or what I was introduced to as the immobility response. So there's fight or flight or freeze. This response gives the impala two benefits. First, there is this last-ditch possibility that the cheetah takes the impala, drags him back to his lair, and when she goes out to do more hunting, maybe wait for the cubs to come in and, whatever, maybe there'll be a second when the impala can shake off the freeze response, get up and run away. Okay, last-ditch effort. But I would imagine in most cases the impala doesn't get away, and in those instances, the freeze response, that immobility response, puts the brain and the body into a state where the impala will not feel the pain of the cheetah's teeth and claws tearing it apart. That's a huge benefit. Now, most modern cultures look down on the freeze or immobility response. Humans are hunters, or at least we like to think that we are. We've also, as the author clearly points out, we've also at times, sometimes still, are prey. If you think of a virus, for example, which is not really an animal or a plant or a fungi, but they still hunt humans. But also, if you're in the wild, if you find yourself in the wilderness, a bear can still tear you to shreds today. So human beings know both sides of that coin, that prey and that predator coin. And we also don't like the freeze response because it's quite similar to being dead. Humans don't like death for obvious reasons, I think, and some others that are not so obvious. And so we try to avoid death. Ernest Becker's The Denial of Death, a great psychology book I just read recently. And Becker says that humans avoid their creatureliness in general to avoid thinking about dying. Because if you're eating a piece of chicken and you realize that chicken was alive and oh my God, So if you think of yourself as being outside of the animals, then you can really try to avoid that thought about death for a while. But the author points out that looking down on that immobility response, we pay a high cost because frequently we are never able to fully discharge the energy that was mobilized for that response to that stressful, now traumatic experience. And because we weren't able to discharge it, it just keeps replaying itself on a loop, and that replaying or recirculation of that energy manifests itself in traumatic symptoms. Okay, the author points out that some people will feel traumatized, but others will not. So who gets traumatized? There's basically 5 points that he makes here who gets traumatized. First, you want to look at the event itself. Was it really bad? Or was it just kind of bad? Was it really bad, but did it happen quickly and then it pass? Human beings tend to do better with short-term stress. Also, what was happening in that person's life? Were they already super stressed? Were they already incredibly vulnerable? Or did they have resources? Did they have support, which makes a big difference? The physical characteristics of the person. I'm a big guy. I'm a big, tall, strong. I like to think so. If the author uses the example of the cold room, I would just get up and leave. But a toddler may not be able to open the door. An infant wouldn't be able to walk to the door. So your physicality determines how strong you are and how well you are able to weather that event. A person's learn capacity. Maybe you have a really precocious toddler and you've taught them how to climb out the window, and then it's warm outside. So you could have a greater learning capability. Also, the individual's experience sense of themselves. I don't know, if you've never encountered air conditioning before, I imagine a really cold room. If you walked out of a hot summer day and walked into a building and it was ice cold, I think that'd be a little startling. But one of the fascinating things under the experience of capacity to meet the danger, the author mentions external resources. So if you have a dangerous thing that's coming towards you, do you have a hiding place? Do you have a weapon, maybe? Maybe you have a friend or a couple of friends. Maybe it's not so dangerous now. And for kids, he mentions an animal, like a dog, a little kitty to cuddle with you, a stuffed toy, an angel. I had a lot of imaginary friends as a kid, and I think that was one of my external resources. So what kind of trauma are we talking about? Well, there's an amazing list here that sounds like a lot like my childhood. The ones that jumped out at me: fetal trauma, birth trauma, illness, abandonment, and beatings. But there are many more, including ones that I didn't think of, like routine surgeries, which small children, of course, could not understand and misinterpret as violent acts against them. But also conscious adults, people who work in healthcare, who have, even ones who have conducted surgeries on other people. The body interprets that incision as a cut, as a threat to the well-being, and there is a trauma response frequently to that. Another thing that the author talks about is the importance of not focusing on the event itself. Quite frequently in traditional therapy, you go there and you talk about the event, and talk about the event, and talk about the event. And the author points out that many trauma sufferers will identify as trauma survivors. And so he points out that we're not just trauma survivors. We are animals with the instinctual, innate ability to heal ourselves. And sometimes this identifying as a survivor, although it is a good coping mechanism, it's a good stopgap, it's not a solution, because as long as you have not discharged that pent-up energy that was generated to address that event that triggered the trauma, the triggering event, as long as you haven't discharged that energy, then you still have trauma. And so you don't want to be a survivor. You want to be an animal. You want to be the impala. You want to have the traumatic event happen to you, and then you want to wake up in the lair while the cheetah's away and shake it off, and run and go catch up with your impala buddies. Not spend the rest of your life identifying as a survivor of cheetah attacks. Okay. That's the author's opinion. He says, they're useful for what they're useful for, but it's limiting. And there's so many wonderful parts of this book, but one of the things that really jumped out at me was the author's cultural critiques. He talks about how we have a culture of denial. Folks will say, that event, that terrible life-shattering event happened last year. You should be over. You should be over it by now. You need to get on with your life. Walk it off. It's the way we do it, especially for men, because you're not even allowed to talk about it if you're men. As a woman, you can talk about it, but you still got to keep going. We view this ability to ignore the trauma as strength, but it is actually degrading us. It's like sandpaper every day. It's wearing us down. And we need to discharge that energy to offload that weight in order to grow. And there's a great quote in here, acknowledging the need to heal. Quote, cultures that use ritual and shamans to heal trauma may seem primitive and superstitious, but they have one important advantage. They address the problem directly. These cultures openly acknowledge the need to heal when someone in their community has been overwhelmed. Most modern cultures, including ours, fall victim to the prevailing attitude that strength means endurance, that it is somehow heroic to be able to carry on regardless of the severity of the symptoms. And this is happening every day all around us. It is, and the author tends to agree, as one of the central underlying causes of so much violence against others and against ourselves in our society. And Dr. Levine says we need to heal ourselves so that we can heal the world, so that we can move forward as a species, as a creature on planet Earth. And that is my review. Oh, one last thing that I wanted to mention, which really was fascinating. The fact that, and again, this goes along with his not focusing on the trauma itself. Oftentimes, when we begin to heal, we'll get memories of events, traumatic events. He touches directly on sexual memories of abuse, sexual abuse, and he points out that these memories are usually symbolic and that they do not necessarily mean that you were in fact sexually abused. So that was something that I have been dealing with lately, and it was good to read. I really enjoyed that. It was good to know that these very disturbing, frightening, and quote bizarre quote memories of past events are extremely real but never happened, and that the experience of being sexually assaulted or raped in a dream or in a memory can be symbolic of the traumatic surgery that you had, for example. And that was an important realization. So, to sum up, one last quote. In order to stay healthy, our nervous systems and psyches need to face challenges and to succeed in meeting those challenges. When this is not met, or when we are challenged and cannot triumph, we end up lacking vitality and are unable to fully engage in life. I know I've been there before, and I'm grateful that I found a way out, moving on up, and Peter Levine's excellent book, Waking the Tiger, has really contributed to that growth. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to hearing and reading your comments and feedback. Thank you. Be well.